We the People is brought to you by Team Kennedy.
We the people!
They're going to fight, and we all have to learn to start talking with each other. And we have to focus on things that we believe in. The king and queen look out of their castle and they say, we're okay because everybody's fighting each other and nobody's coming over the wall for us. And, I want to lead you all over that wall, stop the rancor, and take back our country.
Welcome into We the People right here on News Talk 790 KABC. This is brought to you by Team Kennedy and the Kennedy Campaign. I am your host, Jake Underwood. And did you hear the announcement? Did you hear it? Because there's been a lot of speculation. There's been a lot of people saying, no, it's going to be this person. No, it's going to be this person. But we now know who the vice presidential candidate is for independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and that, of course, is Nicole Shanahan. And we're going to hear what she had to say earlier today in Oakland. But first, I want to remind you about some events we have coming up. For instance, this Saturday, we're holding an event. It celebrates Cesar Chavez Day with RFK Jr. Of course, Cesar Chavez, known for his work in organizing farm workers and voters to exercise their rights as American citizens. And that's what we are aiming to do today with We the People. That's our goal, is to give that power back to the people, the same way Cesar Chavez did with farm workers back in the day. That, of course, is going to be March 30th. It's being held from 3 to 7 at the iconic Union Station right there in LA. More information can be found at Kennedy24.com. So how are we feeling about the vice president? How are we feeling about the vice presidential candidate? Because there was a lot of speculation. The moment the media had a chance to try to tear down this campaign, the movement that you have joined, the movement that you believe in, the movement that is going to hold Washington and the people in Washington responsible, the moment they could speculate, they did. And don't get me wrong, I understand the appeal of Aaron Rodgers. I'm a fan. I listen to him on podcasts and when he's on different shows. And he's a really good quarterback. I'm a Browns fan. Every time he played us, I don't think we ever beat him. He's a very good quarterback, very successful, and very outspoken, and he has the right to be. And then the rumor was Jesse Ventura, the man who defeated both Republicans and Democrats in Minnesota. Jesse the Body, WWE Hall of Famer. Very smart politically. Very smart. And of course, he had the TV show that episode mysteriously disappeared out of everyone's DVR. I remember. Do you remember? And all this speculation was made about, well, this just goes to show that this is a sham. It's a sham campaign. Is it? I don't think it is. I think it's one of the only campaigns that are willing to debate. I think it's one of the only campaigns that are willing to listen to people. That's what I think of this campaign. I think independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is one of the only ones that are willing to stand there, look at the people and say, I hear you. What needs to be done? I see you're struggling. What needs to be done? And now let's look into what Nicole Shanahan is known for. She's a lawyer. What does she stand for? And rather than reading some bias, story or telling my opinion, let's look at the facts. Law.stanford.edu. It's kind of just an overall look at everything. In the first paragraph, what does it say about independent vice presidential candidate Nicole Shanahan? She's a California-based attorney whose goal is to tackle some of the world's this is from the website here. Whose goal is to tackle some of the world's greatest challenges: reproductive longevity and equality, criminal justice reform, and a healthy, livable planet. I think that, for the most part, is something we all can get behind. Because and you're gonna hear those trigger words, and it's gonna they're gonna try to say she's an extremist of this, or she's one of those green power extremists. No. Somebody who's fighting, and you know, I want to point out that it doesn't say that she's fighting climate change. She wants a healthy and livable planet. So what does that mean? Because climate change means a lot of things, and it's just one of those words that people use to get you going, right? It's like when people are talking about guns and they say assault weapon. Well, what is an assault weapon? What is it? How can you define it? It's one of those words. So you're going to hear people go, "Oh, she's one of these climate change people." No, she's just fighting for drinking water to be clean, for air to be clean, which is something that independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy also believes in. Now look at his work. It's absolutely crazy how drinking water that is clean has become an issue. And I don't mean to laugh. I really don't. But they're going to try to paint this as, oh, this is one of those extremists. She's not. She's somebody who wants to make sure the planet has water that we can drink, which you need. You need that to live. Or air that's clean to breathe, which you also need. You need those things to live, to survive. You need them. They're important. When it comes to equality in the criminal justice system, once again, they're going to try to do everything they can to put someone in a category because that's what the pundits at the major networks love to do. They love to be able to go, well, this person said this. This person says the sky is blue, so we have to put him in this category. No, not necessarily. Maybe on the right and left you have to do that, but not in an independent presidential campaign. Not in this campaign. This campaign, and you've heard it over the last few weeks, this campaign has people from the left. They have people from the right with one common goal, and that common goal is to make sure this country works for the people again. And who better to lead that fight than one of the most successful environmental lawyers? We've talked about it. He's cleaned up the Hudson. Water is drinkable in a lot of areas in this country because of independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And because of his judgment in the past when it comes to how he would fight things, how he stood for people, I trust his judgment on picking Nicole Shanahan. Mr. Kennedy's not dumb. Mr. Kennedy is somebody who likes to be challenged. We heard Charles Eisenstein, one of his top advisors, talk about that. He's somebody who wants to be challenged. And if he's wrong on something, he's willing to sit down, look at the facts, and say, hey, I was wrong. That, to me, is what this pick is. Because I don't think they agree on everything. But I think they can compromise and find things they agree on. And that's what it's about, isn't it? That's what we aren't seeing in Congress. That's what we're not seeing right now. We're seeing people, they'd rather butt heads and sit there and go, well, we both lost. No, both sides didn't lose. The American people lost. That's who loses. Don't forget that. When your congressman or woman is standing up on the stage after they voted on a stupid bill, we are the ones who lose. We, the people, are the ones who lose. It's our money going to this. It's our time because we're working. We're working for these tax dollars. We're working for this money that just keeps getting pumped into a system that does not work. So when I hear a lawyer who fights for people to have clean drinking water, when I hear a lawyer who's fighting for people to have the rights that they have and make sure, listen, I don't know if you've seen the videos on YouTube, and don't get me wrong, me personally, I support the police. I love the police, but there are some corrupt police out there. And if you haven't seen the YouTube videos of the sovereign citizens with the police audits, look it up. Police training has been so sideways for so long, and the issue is nobody knows the law anymore. There are people that incriminate themselves constantly because they just keep talking to police when they can plead the fifth. They can plead the fifth and demand an attorney. It's our constitutional right. The main thing that matters here is that you have two people who made a career fighting for people like us, who are now joining forces to fight for us on a bigger scale. You don't join politics. You don't join a presidential campaign if you don't see that things need to change and if you're not willing to fight. If you're not willing to fight, you're not joining a campaign. That's what I believe we have with the Kennedy Shanahan ticket. We have two people, completely different generations of people, right? We have two people who are looking at the way that things are now and they're going, this needs to change. Neither one of them had to do it. You know, that's the funniest thing. You know, I remember that being the argument about when President Trump ran in 2016. He doesn't even need to run. You're going to tell me, looking at independent vice presidential candidate Nicole Shanahan's story, that she needs this? No, she doesn't. How about independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Are you going to tell me that he needs this? No, he doesn't need it either. He's doing it because it's what's right. She's doing it because it's what's right. And that's why I believe in a Kennedy Shanahan ticket. And that's why I think you should consider it at the very least. You can register for We the People by going to Kennedy24.com /CA-ballot, BALLOT, as well as see the speech in full on YouTube, Rumble, all of the different social medias. We have it up there, as well as find out more about the policies by going to Team Kennedy 24 on YouTube. We come back, we're going to hear from independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., as well as the vice presidential candidate Nicole Shanahan. That and more when we return.
This is We the People Radio, 790 KABC.
This was paid for by Team Kennedy.
If you want to talk about one issue, they're going to fight. And we all have to learn to start talking with each other. And we have to focus on things that we believe in.
Welcome back to News Talk 790 KABC. This is We the People, and we have the audio. We're going to go through what independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had to say about his vice presidential candidate, Nicole Shanahan. We're also going to hear from her and about her life a little bit later on in the show. But first, I want to let you know about an event that we have coming up. It's the Night of Laughter with RFK Jr. and friends, except this time it's in Detroit. That's right, it's a night of laughter with RFK Jr. and friends in Detroit. It's sure to be a hilarious night. You don't want to miss out. Comedians Rob Schneider, Mike Binder, Trey Stewart, Heather J., and other surprise guests will be there. Tickets start at $125 for the comedy show, as well as some tickets available for an after party. That's going to be April 21st. It starts at 7:30. It's going to be at the Iconic Theater in Royal Oak, Michigan. More information is available at Kennedy24.com. So earlier today, he made the historic announcement of who will be his vice presidential candidate for this independent run. Let's hear from independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on who his pick is and why he made the pick.
Scientist, technologist, a fierce warrior mom, Nicole Shanahan. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Nicole before we bring her out here. Then we're going to see a video. And Nicole's personal story began in Oakland. She was the daughter of impoverished immigrants. She grew up on food stamps and welfare in the city, beset by many, many other unique challenges, all of which she overcame. Her very, very American journey took her to a career as a patent attorney and as a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur and as a Stanford University fellow. Like many of us, Nicole assumed our government was working for our people, that our defense and intelligence agencies wanted peace, that public health agencies wanted us to be healthy, that the USDA supported wholesome foods and family farms, that the EPA would stand up for clean air and clean water, that the Fed wanted prosperous America, that the Democratic Party was on the side of the middle class, the working poor, and Main Street small businesses, that scientists were incorruptible, and that the science was a search for, an exalted search for the truth, and that the President of the United States could always be counted on to defend free speech. I too used to believe those things. Do you remember those days? And she'll tell you that she now understands that the defense agencies work for the military-industrial complex, that health agencies work for Big Pharma, that the USDA works for Big Ag and the processed food cartels, that the EPA is in cahoots with the polluters, that scientists can be mercenaries, that government officials sometimes act as censors, and that the Fed works for Wall Street and allows millionaire bankers to prey upon Main Street and the American worker. And that's why Nicole and I both left the Democratic Party. Our values didn't change, but the Democratic Party did. The things that we love are still the same. We love our families, our children, and our faith. We love clean air and clean water and productive soils and good food. We love the wilderness and our Purple Mountains majesty. And above all, we love our country. We want America to live up to her highest ideals. We want her to be an exemplary nation again, a global leader in freedom, opportunity, and responsible government. We want America to be a peacemaker, a moral authority. We want our children to grow up, as I did, in a country for which they feel love and pride. We want them to feel safe and to have every opportunity for dignity, prosperity, and community. We want them to have confidence in their futures. We want them to have the best education. We want America to be friendly to farmers and entrepreneurs. We want America to honor its veterans and its teachers. We want scientists to stand up for science and for truth. And we want our government to defend our right to free speech. Nicole and I share all of these values. And you know what? Despite the artificially orchestrated divisions, nearly all Americans share the same values that we do. And I'm grateful that Nicole has put her self-interest aside and made the momentous and very, very difficult decision to embark with me on this extraordinary crusade to win back our country. And I was most importantly looking for a partner who is a young person. And Nicole is only 38 years old. And I wanted that because I want Nicole to be a champion to the growing number of millennials and Gen Z Americans who have lost faith in their future and lost their pride in our country. Many in her generation have stopped believing that older people who have been running our government for so long understand them or represent their interests. That older generation that now dominates Congress, the Supreme Court, and the White House is the same generation, the same people who ran up the $34 trillion debt, and millennials and Gen Z and their children will shoulder the burden. It was my baby boom generation that unleashed the epidemic of chronic disease that has made America the sickest country in the world. The only response to this calamity by government officials today is to gaslight us into pretending that it's all normal, that it's not really happening. Nicole and I both share doubts about the corporate captured uniparty and that it can produce leaders capable of imagining a different version of America, a hopeful version of the future. We both have doubts that either the Democratic or Republican Party nominees are capable of dealing with the complexities and fulfilling the great promise of a technology-driven economy. In the right hands, technology can be America's salvation. It can give us the path out of debt chaos, out of environmental ruin, out of the chronic disease epidemic. But we both fear that in the wrong hands, technology can turn its power against humanity. We don't think that either President Trump or President Biden understands the promise or the peril of technology sufficiently to direct its trajectory toward freedom and healing and prosperity. And we're now witnessing this dismaying contest between the two oldest presidential candidates in history. Those two men, during their terms as president, both worked to close our Main Street businesses for a year, 3.3 million businesses, with no due process, no scientific citation, no public hearings, no environmental impact statement. They just told us to shut them down. Those policies that both of them engineered transferred $4 trillion from the middle class to this new oligarchy of billionaires. They created 500 new billionaires in 500 days, a billionaire a day. Today, together, they ran up a greater debt than all previous presidents combined since George Washington. Two men with a single term in office each. Now, they don't want us talking about those things. They want us instead to hate each other, to fear the other guy. But to young Americans, they look like two sides of the same coin. If we vote for either of them again, we can expect, and we will deserve, more of the same.
That, of course, is independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., kind of explaining his pick there a little bit. When we got to take a break for news, but when we come back, we're going to hear from the vice presidential candidate. There was an incredible video package where she talked about her life. We're going to play that for you, as well as hear from the future vice president of the United States, maybe. As long as we get registered on We the People and we get him on the ballot here in California, it's a real possibility. That and more when we come back. You're listening to We the People.
This is We the People Radio, 790 KABC.
This was paid for by Team Kennedy.
In the right hands, technology can be America's salvation. It can give us the path out of debt chaos, out of environmental ruin, out of the chronic disease epidemic. But we both fear that in the wrong hands, technology can turn its power against humanity. We don't think that either President Trump or President Biden understands the promise or the peril of technology sufficiently to direct its trajectory toward freedom and healing and prosperity.
Welcome back to News Talk 790 KABC. This is We the People, and of course we're brought to you by the Kennedy Campaign. I am your host, Jake Underwood. And without further ado, It's time we hear from the vice presidential candidate on the Kennedy-Shanahan ticket. And if you have any doubt about who can fix the problems, of course, keep in mind that Kennedy and Shanahan can. I hope we use that. I really like that. But Kennedy and Shanahan can, and let's hear more from the newly appointed vice presidential candidate, Nicole Shanahan.
Today is completely unprecedented, and it's going to take a new generation of leadership that understands deeply those threats because they are themselves technologists to address the issues at hand. It's going to take leadership that has spent their life in technology. It's going to take leadership that understands what questions to ask, how to ask them, and what it looks like to implement a plan. This is not the America of the 1950s. This is the America of 2024. And in this America, it's going to take communities coming to the White House that never have actually been in the White House. And these are going to be tech communities. These are going to be Gen Z communities. These are going to be millennial communities who really believe that working together is going to get us to a healthier America with solutions that actually work. I was born in Roseville, California, near Sacramento. Then my mom and dad decided to move back to Oakland into the home my dad grew up in. You learn from a young age growing up in Oakland that we are all made equal and we all get a shot at something great. And the color of your skin just gives you a different, cool cultural perspective. And you know, I'm half Chinese, half Caucasian, but to the people around me, I was Nicole. My mom immigrated to the United States in 1983 from Guangzhou, China. My father, in particular, struggled with substance abuse, various mental health challenges. We relied on government assistance for a good portion of my childhood. Every time my dad lost a job, there wasn't a lot of money to cover basic expenses like food. And we would get food stamps and go to the local grocery store with our mom, my brother, and I. And at the checkout counter, I remember she would ask my brother and I to go stand by the magazines when it was time to pay. Whew. It was hard. It's really hard. Those programs, they saved my family. They gave me a chance. I went to the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. I graduated in 2007, and I started working actually on medical device patents as a paralegal. I was always asked to be kind of the resident law firm nerd that was in charge of making sure the software always worked well and represented all of the client data correctly. And I loved it. I was at Santa Clara Law School, which is really in the heart of Silicon Valley, and trains some of the top IP law professionals in the country. In 2014, I joined Stanford Law and Computer Science to become a Codex Fellow. My center at Stanford, Codex, one of our core themes is how to build humanistic programming into AI. AI unregulated can be disastrous for us. We're already seeing early signs of it. And, you know, on day one of Bobby Kennedy's presidency as his vice president, I will mobilize the best legal ethicists in AI on the planet. And they're going to have knowledge of computational ethics. So after my 2 years at Stanford, I spun out my company, Clear Access IP. I then founded a foundation of my own called Bia Echo Foundation, one of the largest funds in women's reproductive health ever created. Human reproductive health is in decline globally, and at a pace that is actually causing alarm in certain countries right now. Women's health is a direct indication of environmental health. I gave birth to a healthy baby girl in November of 2018. That was the happiest day of my life. From time of birth until 7 months, she smiled, she giggled, she paid attention, she hugged, she, grasped for things. She had a great appetite. At around 10 months, things had changed dramatically. She wasn't engaging as much, and her energy didn't seem as high, and her muscle mass seemed weak. I would, sit her to just sit on her own, and she wouldn't be able to hold herself up when previously she could. She wasn't speaking, she wasn't pointing, she seemed kind of, in her own world, and the evaluator clearly identified symptoms associated with autism spectrum disorder. And it was then and there in 2020 that my life changed forever. Chronic disease in children is due to environmental disruptors that cause inflammatory symptoms, which then reduce the child's ability to heal. I've learned that the top environmental health exposures are really in 3 categories. There's endocrine disruption, which is caused by various chemicals in our consumer products, chemicals and preservatives in our foods. The second category of environmental exposures are electrochemical in nature. That electrical interference comes in the form of our wireless technologies, our devices, our cell phones, and we have no regulatory body currently in the United States keeping an eye on this. The third category of environmental exposures really is medications that we rely on for our healthcare system. And ironically, many of these medications are prescribed to help manage the symptoms related to exposures caused by categories 1 and 2. It's a Band-Aid that actually poses new risks. I've spent my life in data and technology, and I know that there is a solution here to this problem. We have the tools today to get there, and if we are open to this conversation, we are on path to healing America. And that is a simple conclusion that I think any person in America can make once they have the information. We owe it to the American family to take these toxins out of our food and out of our water, out of our medicines. This campaign is so much more than politics. This campaign is about what is sacred. And what is sacred is our health and our families in this land, this beautiful land that deserves much greater attention and care than we've given it. I'm making this move as an independent now because I've been finding it harder and harder to find the leadership in the White House that represents the issues closest to my heart. And in order for us to get there, I think we all need to rethink what has happened to the DNC and the RNC for that matter. We need an opportunity, we crave an opportunity to see how we can serve in the best interests of the American public outside of a system that hasn't worked. We deserve a real election of optimism. And that's what Bobby Kennedy gives us a chance at.
That, of course, was the video that introduced Vice Presidential candidate Nicole Shanahan in the announcement today. And it kind of gives you a little bit of a background, kind of tells you where she's coming from, where she's been. And, I think there's something that it's been a common thread. And if you join us weekly, first, thank you. And if you're a supporter, also thank you. But don't forget to register for We the People. Those steps are available at Kennedy24.com/CA-ballot, BALLOT. But you're noticing that both people from the right and the left, they're fed up. They're looking at the way that things are, and they're seeing, it shouldn't be like this. We shouldn't be sick. We shouldn't have the problems that we have. And that's what I got from Nicole Shanahan, at least in that video package that we played before she came out today at the event in Oakland. But what we're going to do when we come back, we're going to hear from Nicole Shanahan what she had to say in today's event and why she wanted to join the Kennedy campaign and what is it that kind of made her want to finally jump into politics. Because, I said it earlier, it's you really got to want to fight for the country to get into politics, and that's left, right, or center. You have to really fight for something that you believe in to be able to go, you know what, I want to make this my life for the next 6 months, for the next year, for the next 4 years, for the next potentially 8 years. You have to really believe that the country needs help. And that's definitely what Nicole Shanahan and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. showed today, and they laid out that plan on how they want to help this country. And we'll hear that plan when we return right here on We the People.
This is We the People Radio, 790 KABC.
This was paid for by Team Kennedy.
Community server. Go through not what's the purpose. That's why I'm standing on business.
Welcome back to We the People right here on News Talk 790 KABC. I'm not going to waste any time. I know we've been waiting for it, and she laid it out. She talked about her childhood. She talked about her passion and why it means so much to her to join this campaign. And now I bring to you the remarks made today by future Vice President of the United States, Nicole Shanahan.
Hi, everybody. And thank you so much for being here today. It is so good to be here in Oakland. This city will always have a special place in my heart. You know, I grew up just a few miles from this very spot. My mother, who's standing right there with her phone up, she immigrated here from Guangzhou, China. And my late father was an Irish and German American. I want to tell you a little bit about my childhood so you can understand the source of my politics and convictions. My mother's first job when she came to the United States in 1983 was as a live-in caretaker to an elderly woman here at Lake Merritt. By the time I was born, she worked as a dental office secretary. My father loved my brother and I dearly, but he was very troubled, plagued by substance abuse, and he struggled to keep a job. From watching my father and his struggles, I learned not to be judgmental. He was doing the best he could. I think of him when I see the statistics of the millions of Americans who are addicted, depressed, or suffering. This is one of the epidemics of our time. It affects nearly every American family. I wish my experience was unusual, but it's not. It has become part of my determination to do something for our country. Every time my dad lost his job, our family just couldn't cover expenses. Food, gas, clothing, upkeep. It adds up more than you have in this situation. I know a lot of Americans know exactly what that's like, to just be one misfortune away from disaster. I don't think we would have made it without food stamps and government help. My mom worked hard, but it wouldn't have been possible to keep it together without that help. As you probably know, I became very wealthy later on in life, but my roots in Oakland taught me many things I have never forgotten. That the purpose of wealth is to help those in need. That's what it's for. And I want to bring that back to politics too. That is the purpose of privilege. I went to St. Mary's High School, just a few miles from here. In my junior year, we have some St. Mary's Panthers here. In my junior year, I had another formative experience, and that set me up for this lifetime of political consciousness. I applied for a program to live with families in El Salvador. In praying with these families and helping them rebuild after the civil war there, I learned what war really is. I learned how it rips lives apart, it brutalizes children, how it visits unspeakable horror on the innocent. And I also learned the resilience of the human spirit and its infinite capacity to heal, to forgive and to restore. El Salvador is where I came to understand war, but more importantly is where I also came to understand peace. That is what inspired me to my first political action in high school. At the onset of the Iraq War, I became an anti-war activist. Yes. If I'm being honest, I didn't really know how to do it. I printed pamphlets and I led a walkout, and we went to our local radio station. But I knew in my bones then that violence begets more violence. I'd seen what that does to society, and I didn't want my country, the country I love so dearly, to be doing that in the world. Yeah. So these are two of my political convictions I hold today: to serve peace and to help those in poverty. Yeah. So you can understand why I gravitated to the Democratic Party, because that was supposed to be the party of peace, the party of compassion. Many Democrats, we still believe in those ideals, but unfortunately, as an institution, it has lost its way. There is only one anti-war candidate today, and you won't find him in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. He is an independent, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Yes. Yes, and it is his commitment to peace and to the welfare of hardworking people in America that draw me as a person of compassion to his candidacy. Yes. As recently as a year ago, I really didn't think much of Bobby Kennedy because I didn't know much about him. All I had was a mainstream media narrative that was effectively telling me horrible, disparaging things. But then a friend who's here today pulled me aside and she said, "Nicole, please do me a favor. Just listen to an interview with Bobby Kennedy, just one." So I did. And then I listened to another one and then another one, and I recognized that the person who I was seeing in these interviews was the exact opposite of the media slander of his character. I saw a person of intelligence, of compassion, and of reason. I saw a fellow lawyer who had committed himself to finding the truth and fighting for the environment and for people. I discovered a person who speaks out on issues that, even though they are critically important to human health and welfare, are consistently ignored by our government. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope for our democracy again. We can do this. It's possible. One of those issues also happens to be a passion of mine and a focus of my philanthropic work: chronic disease. I got into it through my own journey of reproductive health, followed by a steep learning curve for caring for my daughter, who has an autism diagnosis. In that journey, I discovered that women's fertility is in precipitous decline around the world. We are facing a crisis in reproductive health that is embedded in the larger epidemic of chronic disease. Because it has been so personal for me and my daughter, I got deep into the research and consulted some of the best scientists and doctors. Let me tell you what I found.
There are three main causes. One is the toxic substances in our environment, like endocrine disrupting chemicals in our food, water, and soil, like the pesticide residues, the industrial pollutants, the microplastics, the PFAs, the food additives, and the forever chemicals that have contaminated nearly every human cell. Yes, and it makes you angry to hear this. It makes me angry to say it because we shouldn't be here right now. Second is electromagnetic pollution. You don't hear politicians talking much about that either, but it is something we need to look at. As Bobby says, we need to investigate every possible cause of chronic disease epidemic that is devouring our nation from the inside. Third, I'm sorry to say, is our medications. Pharmaceutical medicine has its place, but no single safety study can assess the cumulative impact of one prescription on top of another prescription and one shot on top of another shot on top of another shot throughout the course of childhood. We just don't do that study right now, and we ought to. We can, and we will. Conditions like autism used to be 1 in 10,000. Now here in the state of California, it is 1 in 22. 1 in 22 children affected. Allergies, obesity, anxiety, depression, our children are not well. Our people are not well, and our country will not be well for very much longer if we don't heed this desperate call for attention.
And that, of course, is a little bit of what vice presidential candidate Nicole Shanahan had to say today, as I guess you could say she accepted the nomination. Is that the way we would phrase that? I don't know. But I want to thank you all for listening. If you want to hear that in full, you can. It's on our social media. You could go to YouTube, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's on X. It's on Facebook. It's on Rumble. Just go to the official campaign page, and that, of course, is on there. I want to thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, of course, go to Kennedy24.com to find out more. We have those events coming up. Maybe go out Saturday. It's going to be a nice event. Good day for it. Don't forget to register for We the People. Those steps are available at Kennedy24.com/CA-ballot, BALLOT. Until next week, I have been Jake Underwood. Thank you so much and have an incredible week. We'll see you next time.
This is We the People Radio, 790 KABC.